Well, I think it's probably disappointing for people outside or who like to root against Alabama because they were pretty sure they were done after Texas and USF. But I think it's interesting because they are unlikely underdogs. I think it's only the fourth time since 2010 that they've not been favored in a game, all of them against Georgia, but 2-1 in those games. And I think because of the dynastic nature of what they've accomplished over the last 16, 17 years, it's a little bit of a different kind of team. They grew. I've used the analogy that typically when Alabama comes out of fall practice and starts the season, no team stays stagnant or else they get worse, but the room that they have for growth is typically not a lot. There are rough edges to, file away. There may be some individual positions that have to grow a little bit, but basically they're pretty stout. This year, there was a lot of room to grow, and the good news for them is that they grew a lot, and now they have an opportunity, at least an opportunity to play for a conference championship.
Are these among the two top of the four teams in college football, Georgia and Alabama?
They haven't separated themselves, and Alabama certainly hasn't, and that's why I understand what Nick and others have said, that it would be, their word, not mine, disrespectful not having an SEC team in. I don't know that I agree with that, because I don't think the SEC, while maybe still the best conference, there's not this gap, in my judgment, from watching teams play this year between the SEC and the other conferences, and that's been borne out in non-conference play. The argument has always been that there is a more difficult upper middle class in the SEC, as it were, and that even the lower middle class, right day, right road game can be difficult. That's still true, but I don't think there's the same type of separation. And because of that, it won't be unreasonable if Alabama pulls the upset to put them in over, perhaps, for instance, a diminished Florida State team. Neither will it be unreasonable to leave them out. So it's, I don't know. Georgia might have separated and might be unequivocally one of the best four teams in the country. Does that perception change if they lose to Alabama? I don't think that anyone has separated where they say, well, you know what, even if they lose, they're getting in. I do think probably that Georgia can still beat anybody, even if they lose. I'm not sure if Alabama's there yet, but Alabama can win the game, so we'll see how it goes.
The development of Jalen Milroe, do you think he's one of the guys from week 2 from that Texas loss to now? What has he really grown in?
Patience, willingness to run the football, which I think was huge, which really was on display against LSU. I was at practice on Thursday and saw more quarterback run that week, and I was like, that's interesting. And then it's become quite a weapon for them. And he's such a phenomenal athlete. He's growing as a quarterback. He'll tell you that. He said it many times that he's not a finished product. But boy, he's taken steps that are leaps and bounds over the course of the year. Never gets flustered. And I think the savvy that he's shown, knowing when to get out of the pocket, knowing when to go ahead and pick up the first down. Every play doesn't have to be a huge play. It's really good if it's 3rd and 6. It's really good to pick up 7 and step out of bounds and get a fresh set of downs. And Jalen's been great at that. And because of the pressure that he puts on a defense, because of that, it's allowed him to use that gift that he has. He's got remarkable touch on the deep ball. He's fearless, and I think he probably has grown as much, if not more, than any quarterback I've seen in the country over the course of the year.
When you think back to the beginning of the season versus now, what surprised you the most about this Georgia Bulldogs team?
Once again, I think growth and winning a different way. I mean, this defense is still really, really good. But the last 2 years, all those guys are playing for the Philadelphia Eagles. They're not as good as they were the last couple of years. They're still really good. That's not some kind of slight or insult. So instead, they just now cut you to pieces on offense with this explosive offense. And even when Brock Bowers has been hurt and Ladd McConkey's been out, they just find another weapon. I've been absolutely mesmerized watching Dylan Bell. Hand it to him, they let him throw it, they throw it to him. He's like a secret weapon that it's like when you have an emergency, break glass and use Dylan Bell. He's so they've got so many weapons on offense, and Carson Beck is the epitome of what happens when you stay the course. Not unlike Milroe, but in a different way. because Carson had a chance a couple years ago, and a lot of people at Georgia like to downplay this, but Carson had a chance to take over when JT Daniels got hurt. Didn't go as well as perhaps he would have hoped in practice that week, so they went to Stetson, and everybody knows what happened after that. A lot of guys would get discouraged after that or say, this is not for me, they're not handing me the reins. He just kept getting better. And now, man, he's a dude. I mean, he's an NFL quarterback. Now, I'll get ahead of this. I don't know, whatever they want to pay him, they should, and Carson should stay, in my judgment, because we've seen quarterbacks struggle who don't have a lot of starts. So come back, get probably 15 more starts, given Georgia's talent under your belt, and you might be QB1, next year. So I think he's just been terrific for them. He's put up numbers. I know he's probably not in the Heisman race this year, but he's put up numbers that are certainly worthy of being evaluated. And I think he's been growth. A lot of the Georgia fans got really upset with me because I didn't rank them preseason number 1, and all I said was I want to see the quarterback play. I didn't think that was unreasonable. I've seen him. He's a dude, and I think he's been terrific for them.
All that being said about Milroe and the Georgia defense, what do you think the key to keeping him under control is?
Don't let him hit the shot plays. Don't let him crush you running. He's going to get some yards running. I mean, he'll be one of the fastest guys on the field, and he's 6'2", 6'3", and weighs 230 pounds. You're unlikely to shut him down, but if you can make him hesitate and perhaps make a mistake, which he hasn't made many of over the last month. But if Georgia can do that, and particularly keep him from killing them on third down with conversions with his legs and with big plays, he's hit a ton of third and long passes too. If you can put him in third down situations and win those, that will be the best way to keep him under control. I would highly recommend against letting him get into 4th and 31 situations. He's really good in those situations.
What was your reaction to 4th and 31?
I thought at first that he'd thrown it out of the back of the end zone, and that I was sort of stunned disbelief, I think, in what happened, because you don't see that play pulled off very often, because I don't like it when people say it was a Hail Mary. It was not. It was a dime. It was an absolute laser beam dime, on a 4th and 31 at the end of the game. You just don't see it, and it was a great play by Isaiah Bond. I don't want to diminish that at all, but there was like one window about that big that ball could be put into, and he put it there, and it was an unbelievable throw. So I was sort of stunned disbelief after everything that had gone wrong, the shakiness that they had shown, whether it was penalty or even if the guy clapped, he didn't clap, whatever, the snap went sailing back toward the other goal line, and then to pull it out was you're like, did that just happen? It was pretty remarkable.
The possibility of Alabama losing Chase McClellan tomorrow, does that hurt, I guess, the run game? You say something like that, who needs to step up?
Hey, look, he's a terrific back, and he's hard-nosed, and he's experienced, and he runs tough, but they've got a really deep running back room that hasn't fully been on display. Roydell Williams has been really good for them second half of the season. I think Jam Miller is a guy who is explosive, and it seems like every time he touches it, something big happens. Probably see a little more of him, and there's probably some hope that maybe you'll see a little bit more of Justice Haynes, who, I had a good friend of mine, a guy who was in my wedding, who's like Johnny Bulldog to the core. You cut him and little bulldogs climb out of him. He said, my worst fear is that Justice Haynes steps on our face with a hobnail boot and breaks our nose. So, we'll see what happens.
There was a few people that earlier in the season said that Nick Saban lost his fastball. What have you seen from Coach Saban this year?
Oh, yeah. People love to say that, don't they? I've used this analogy a lot, so I'm not breaking new ground for you, but most coaches that I've encountered, there are very, very few exceptions. Most coaches I encounter, because of the self-imposed pressure, because of the grind, because of the nature of the attention, the scrutiny, and all the way things are changing with players and everything, it just eats away at them, eats away, and they either get a little complacent or they get a little frustrated or whatever it might be. This guy's different, man. He needs it like you and I need oxygen, and he is always looking for a better way. I mean, when he was with us in the national championship game last year, he recommended a book to me that I've read parts of, excerpts of, and it's about believing in people and getting the most out of people. It's remarkable how that drives him, and how the first time I met him, and he doesn't remember this because I didn't stay in Michigan long enough before coming to ESPN, I met him when he got the Michigan State job, but I left before he ever coached a game there. But the difference in him in that news conference and the perception of him, say, dating back to the Michigan State days, or even LSU, and what you see now shows remarkable growth of a human being who successful people don't often like to adjust because they do what's made them successful. And he, more than anybody in sports, I think has changed his approach. Maybe Mike Krzyzewski. Maybe, Nick and Mike are probably the two guys who adapted better than any old school coaches that I've ever seen and continue to have success all the way through.
And speaking of coaches, let's talk Mike Bobo for a second, someone who faced a lot of criticism at the beginning of the season, and now seeing what he's done, do you think that he was the right guy for this Georgia team?
It's obvious. I mean, what they've done has been remarkable, and I've always liked Mike and respected him, but you looked at that and you go, boy, I don't know, because the recent results and the recency bias didn't suggest that this was going to ignite the Georgia offense, yet it did. And he's got a great way with quarterbacks. He knows how to use personnel packages. He knows how to pick spots really well, good play caller, really smart guy, highly respected in the industry. And I think he is worthy of every accolade that he's gotten up to this point. I mean, he, before he had his health issues there for a while, he was doing a really good job as a head coach and was kind of on an upward trajectory in my judgment. And to have a guy like that who's been a head coach, certainly knows Georgia inside out, knows the conference inside out, and is very not only sound but clever and able to be creative, not in a wild bunch of trick plays kind of way, but he's clever and creative in his ability to create matchups. Like, everybody in the free world knows that they want to throw the ball to Brock Bowers when he's healthy, and yet they still throw the ball to Brock Bowers, And there's a certain level of creativity that goes with that, and I think Mike's just done an unbelievable job for Georgia this year.